Let me start by saying that we are really living in devastating times, and this is really stating the obvious, and not just when it comes to the healthcare outcomes, but also economic outcomes. Finally, the two are strongly related. I just recently read in New York Times that we are about to face catastrophic hunger. So no words to explain how bad this is, right? And moreover, it's likely that we are living only through the phase one of the crisis. Judging by the Oxford studies, but also a number of others from Imperial College and from the US, this seems to be a scenario that will hold on for at least a while, if not 1 or 2 years, right? So bad news all over the place, but enough with the bad news, right? We are hearing that all the time, and that there is no need to repeat it. The net effect is going to be negative, but it's most likely not going to be homogeneous, and there will be winners as well as losers from this crisis like any other. And this is what I want to talk to you about. I want to talk about what will differentiate winners from losers. And by winners, I don't mean just short-term companies that have experienced the upsurge in demand due to the fact that they're in e-commerce or some of the verticals they're experiencing positive effects of the crisis. I'm talking about the companies that are going to be able to reap benefits from this discontinuity and from this inflection point that Matthias has described. And equally, when I talk about losers, I don't mean just those that are experiencing the short-term difficulties like airline industries or tourism. I'm talking about those who will not be able to adapt and make best use of this crisis. All right, so here are 3 things that I could come up with, 3 factors that I see differentiating those that are able to reap the discontinuity and the inflection points, and those that are going to become victim of it. So the first one is obviously the industry differences. Not all industries are equally affected. And if you look at the Board of Innovation data and their projections, there is likely to be a range between positive impact of the crisis for the industry such as e-commerce, all the way up to the minus 50% or more decrease in demand and revenues for the industry such as tourism. And here we are taking Q2 to Q4 as a reference of this year, of course. So there is definitely a difference in industries, and how you are going to adapt will depend on which industry you're in. But there are some of the factors that will be important across the industry and that are not determined by where you're at. So I want to really talk and focus about those. And the first one, actually the second in my list, is the liquidity and the ability to invest in innovation. So liquidity is not just important in terms of survival. It is also important for the ability of companies to invest their way out of this recession. And this is not just guesswork. We have actually fundamentally solid academic evidence from the previous crisis that companies that were able to maintain and even increase their strategic investments were able to actually come out of the crisis stronger. So my colleague Dries Fams, for example, in his webinar a couple of weeks back, has cited research done on the 2001-2002 crisis that shows that there were 2 types of companies, those that shrank and that decreased their critical investments, and those that maintained them. 4 years down the road, in terms of the stock price effects, those that were able to maintain and even increase the investments in innovation and other key strategic resources were actually increasing their performance 300% and more. So, so this is clear, right? Investing your way out of the crisis when it comes to strategic investments like innovation is an incredibly important factor of winning or losing. Moreover, in 2008 crisis, we have seen even more substantial evidence of that. Professor Yanis Ioannou performed an analysis of companies and their behavior in 2008 crisis. And what he shows that actually there is a positive effect of the crisis for the investments in the innovation and the stakeholder relationship. So while 2001-2002 study shows that there is only 25% of companies that fall in that camp of investors, in the 2008 crisis, there seems to be a better evidence of companies being able to maintain their investments. And similarly, the 2008 study shows a positive results on return on assets, in this case, from the investments. So to summarize on the investment in innovation, let me quote another CEO of Intel, Craig Barrett, who in 2009 said, you cannot save your way out of crisis. You can only invest your way out of crisis. And that is my first message to the leaders of the companies. Are you going to be those who invest your way out of the crisis? What can you do in order to maintain your investments in the innovation and even increase them? Because this is the good time to make investments. There's plenty of good resources as well as talent available, and tech giants are those who are generally knowing that, like Intel. And then to everyone else, even if you're not leading the company, what can you do to appeal to the leadership? Can you send an email? Can you tell a story about how important this is? Because I think that particularly in Europe, we need more of those who are investing in innovation. So that's basically on the investment side. Now, the third thing that I think is relevant here is what companies are actually doing and how they're acting in this context. And there we see two different types. One is reactive and rigid. So companies that are playing more of a wait and see and stick to the old plan until something happens. And honestly, I wouldn't even call this a plan. This is more of the aftermath of either lack of leadership or hierarchical structures and organizations that are not able to respond fast enough to a crisis that has appeared literally overnight. So that I think is number one. You don't want to fall in that part, the reactive and the rigid. The good news is, however, that there are many companies that are proactive and that are looking progressively at this. And by this, I mean experimenting and looking for other ways how to resolve the challenges that are being thrown at us. And even looking to get ahead and innovate towards the new normal. And here I think that there is definitely an advantage of companies like Enel or FC Barcelona that I worked with, who have had innovation organizations that are able actually to take on this experimental and agile way of working, whether these are crowdsourcing platforms, hubs that collaborate with startups, communities of employees that are focused on a particular topic of their interest. So having those innovation organizations is certainly an asset, and we are seeing the benefits of those, particularly in the times of crisis. But we are seeing another thing. We are seeing employee activism and a shift towards agility. We are seeing people more interested to take initiative. And that goes above and beyond of what organizational structures we have. So I think that this is something to capitalize on. And here I would like to say that if you're a leader of an organization, you want to ask yourself, am I starting a task force to look at threats and opportunities that are coming out of this environment? What am I doing in order to be able to adapt out of this, right? And if you are perhaps not a leader of an organization, but you're working and you care about your organization, your question could be, how can I influence this? Is there an idea that I can pitch? Or is there even a WhatsApp group of employees that I can create so that we can, plan better and adapt better to this? For example, I teach the ESADE Business School, as Lily mentioned. We are creating more and more of these little organizational mechanisms, such as simple WhatsApp groups that help us to exchange practices quicker. And it has proven to be very simple and very, very relevant tool. So there's certainly space and importance for large investments, but there is also a lot of space for increasing agility in the day-to-day working environment, and hopefully keeping it for after the crisis. So reactive, proactive, and then finally, we are seeing some revolutionary organizations. And these may be new ones that haven't been, the pioneers of the previous decades, but those that will come to shape this decade. After 2001, 2002 crisis, we have seen Netflix emerge and many more. After 2008, Airbnb and other unicorns of the shared economy popped up. The question that I want to leave you with is, who are going to be the unicorns of 2020 Great Lockdown, as it is called? And I can talk another 15 minutes on this, so I don't want to take too much of my time, but let's just say that EdTech, learning space, virtual entertainment is high on my agenda when it comes to engaging and following up with them. So that's it in terms of the three factors that determine winners from losers. Now, the last thing perhaps is, what can you do about it? How can you become an innovator and even a revolutionary one in these circumstances? And there, I think there are three things to keep in mind. It comes mainly from the teaching that I've been doing with the MBAs, something that I've started to pay attention to already in the last, I would say, 2 or 3 years. Innovation in discontinuous context, more radical forms of innovation, how they happen. And so, from this experience and from this work that I've been doing with moonshot factories like Telefonica Alpha, I can share three things for you. One is observe the signals, gaps, and the workarounds that you can see emerging. And this can be from press, or it can be from what you're hearing on the streets or in your environment. Look at just the sheer prevalence of people who are losing healthcare benefits, for example, in the United States due to the unemployment. Changes and challenges that people experience while working at home. Anxiety, mental health challenges that we're all facing now. These are your signals about the needs that are not being answered in this environment. So these are the glimpses of change for the future. And so, for example, what I have been focused on that's closer to me is the sheer number of MBAs who are losing their internships over the summer due to the circumstances. So how can I help them to make a productive summer and also at the same time do something that's going to create value for the society and create value for themselves in terms of a business opportunity? So that has been my question, my signal and glimpse of change. The second thing is capitalizing on the customer openness and experimentation that goes with it. And here I think about three things. So first of all, if you look at the habits of the customers, of everyone in the society, we're seeing them as being intrinsically disrupted at the moment. This is a good time for innovators because there is a behavioral change that's happening for you. Generally, it's really hard to change behavior of people when it's set. Now, this is not the case. Now it's a good time to come in with a new value proposition. And moreover, the expectations are lower because we are living in unprecedented times. So you can experiment and your customers will help you as you're developing your new value proposition. For example, my students have been very helpful in this new innovation program that I'm developing for them to innovate their way out of the COVID-19 crisis. Openness there very high. So you can collaborate with them, you can ask for feedback. So this is the second thing that I think is relevant. And then finally, engaging talent and the ecosystem. Drive has never been stronger. we are all, having this instinct of survival that is really coming out of this crisis. And that people more engaged, more willing to push hard. And that's what's needed in the context of innovation entrepreneurship. So that grit has never been stronger. And secondly, people are willing to volunteer, willing to help and think beyond their immediate benefit for the benefit of the others. So I think that, as individual, this makes it easier to recruit talent, to find collaborators. As a company, you want to think about how you can, how you can engage talent and how you can motivate them to follow you and to join you in solving some of the biggest challenges that we are facing now. That's it. I would kind of close it here with these three things, Matthias, and let you ask me questions what you thought was relevant, as well as the participants. So, observing the signals, workarounds, challenges that are emerging, capitalizing on the openness of the customers and willingness to collaborate and experiment with you, and then engaging talent and building ecosystem that can solve the challenges. That's it.